In this video, we're going to do the same thing, but we have the quadratic function that's in a different form. It's got this form a x minus h squared plus k. Right? If you have a quadratic function in this form, this one's designed so that at a glance you can tell what the vertex is. So again, they might ask you to graph it. Okay, so if they ask you to graph this, you can see that since a equals -2, that this parabola would open down. Okay, the other thing you can see at a glance is what the vertex is. When it's in this form, you get the vertex by finding the h and the k. Now this is a little tricky at first, but you see the minus in front of the h? That means when you go to pull what the h is, you're going to take the opposite of whatever you see there. So if it's x plus 3 like that, the h is actually going to be -3, okay? Then the 8 is supposed to be after the plus sign. So that means whatever you see there, that's going to be your k. So you don't change the sign on that, okay? So the vertex is -3, 8. So we already know a lot about this. We know that it's going to have a vertex over here at -3, +8. Okay. So we know we're going to have a vertex there. We know the thing opens down. What we need to get is like how wide it's going to be. So you really could go in and you could find the y-intercept. It's just not as easy as on the other one. You're still letting x equal 0, but what you got to do then is plug in the 0 for x and just work it out and see what happens. So you wind up with -2 times 9 plus 8. That turns out to be -10. So what that tells you is you know this is going to cross down here at -10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's going to cross the y-axis down here at -10. Okay. That would be the point 0, -10. Let me fix that. Okay. All right. Then you know the vertex is -3, +8. So you know that's where it's going to be. And you know it opens down. You just don't know how wide to make it. So that's where we could take advantage of knowing the y-intercept. So now we kind of get a sense of how wide it's going to be. But x-intercepts are pretty important features. You know, x-intercepts really are zeros and roots. They're the real zeros and the real roots. Okay. So x-intercepts are usually something good to find. And on this one, our problem was -2, x plus 3 squared plus 8. So with x-intercepts, you're trying to find out what causes y to be 0. And so you're really trying to solve this. Best way, or sometimes a good way to solve this, is to use the square root method. So I'm going to subtract 8. I'm going to divide by -2. Okay. So I'm to the point where I know that x plus 3 squared should equal +4. Then I'm going to wind up taking the square root of both sides. When I do, I'm going to do plus or minus on that right-hand side. So I wind up with x plus 3 equaling ±2. All right, so I like to, at that point, separate it. So we know x equals 3, x plus 3 equals 2, or x plus 3 equals -2. And then you'll come in and you'll subtract 3 from both sides on each of these, and you wind up getting your 2 x-intercepts. So we know it crosses the x-axis at -1 and over here at -5. So that information allows you to kind of get your parabola. Okay, and you know it's going to look something like that. Okay, so sometimes the question is just graph. Okay, and that's all they want you to do. But sometimes you're being asked to wind up just finding the vertex. Well, you could see how easy it was to find the vertex on that. So sometimes you're given something in that form. So let's continue like we did on the others. And they might ask you just, you know, what's the vertex? Okay, and if that's the case, this is the best way to have it, then you know the vertex is going to be just -3, 8. So what you do is just compare it to the x minus, compare it to the formula that they give you, the form of that, which is a x minus h squared plus k. And so you say, oh, okay, so h has to be -3 and k has to be 8, and that's it. Okay, but once you know the vertex, they might ask you about, do you have a maximum or a minimum? And that's when you put together the fact that A equals -2, so the parabola opened down, and you know up here is -3, 8. So you can see that that would be a maximum. So you have a maximum. So sometimes they'll just want to know that. Is the vertex a max or a min? And then sometimes they ask you, what is the maximum? And the language is like this. The maximum is 8. That's the y coordinate. Okay. And it occurs at x equals -3. Okay. All right. And then one last thing that you'll sometimes be asked is they might just have you try to come up with a domain and range. Again, the domain, since it's a polynomial, it's a quadratic function, it's going to just be that. But when they ask you for range, that depends on the vertex, doesn't it? Because the vertex is the high or the low point. So if you hadn't already found it, you would find the vertex and you would think, okay, I know this high point. Still helps to picture it. This high point is right here. So that's the highest it gets. So your range would be from -infinity to 8. Okay. So those are some of the questions that you're going to see in the quadratic function homework. This one is when you have the form A and then the quantity x minus h squared plus k. So I'm going to stop this one. I'm going to do one more video on quadratics dealing with inequalities. Okay, so I'm going to stop.